Here we are back with another video. And in this video, we're going to walk you through the process of costing and pricing your equipment using LMN's estimated catalog. Now don't worry, you don't need too much going into this, but if you had your equipment cost spreadsheet that you could have prepared when you were building your equipment budget, it'd be a good time to pull that out, because that'll help speed this up. If you don't have that equipment cost spreadsheet, don't worry, we're going to walk you through it anyway. Now Dan likes his equipment, as most landscape owners should. Equipment helps you do work more efficiently, reducing labor costs and enabling your company to get more production done in less time. This helps sales. It also takes some of the grunt work out of your crew's working days, which keeps your staff happier, and it reduces the risk of someone getting hurt lifting or moving heavy materials. The only problem with Dan's equipment is that for years, he'd been giving it away to his customers. Now Dan figured he had enough built into his labor rate to cover his equipment costs, but he was never really quite sure how much extra he had built in. In fact, Dan wasn't even sure how much his equipment was actually costing him. On most of Dan's estimates, equipment was an afterthought. He figured if he didn't have any payments on his equipment, it wasn't really costing him anything anyway. And for the equipment that he did have payments on, well, hopefully it was covered somewhere. But it was costing him. Dan needed to pay the insurance, the repairs, and gas for the equipment he owned. And if his customers weren't paying for those costs, then Dan was paying for it, out of what he thought was profit. Now, even worse, the equipment that he did own was going to wear out one day, and it was going to need to be replaced. Now, if he wasn't charging his customers for this owned equipment, well, who was paying to replace it? Of course, that was Dan again, and more of what Dan thought was profit was now money going out the door to replace equipment that he's not charging anybody for. The solution to Dan's problem, of course, was simple. He'd just never done it. But in about half a day, Dan sat down and figured out what his equipment actually cost him per hour. And then he made sure he was including those costs in his estimates. Now he could be sure that his customers were paying the cost of his equipment, and the profit that Dan thought he had built into his jobs was actually that, realized profit. So here in the equipment section of our estimating catalog, we're going to show you how to calculate the cost of your equipment. You just need to remember two important things when you're working through it. Number one, you only need to include billable equipment, equipment that you're actually going to include on your estimates. You don't need to build vehicles used for management or sales or loaders that stay parked in your yard into your estimating catalog. You're never going to include these on estimates. Also think back to your budget. Equipment that you built into your equipment budget needs to get entered into your estimating catalog. The equipment in your equipment budget we counted as a direct cost, a cost that gets recovered from the job. Equipment that you included in your overhead budget did not get entered in your estimating catalog. Equipment costs that are built into overhead are already recovered in your overhead recovery markups. So if you build this equipment directly on your estimates, you'd actually be charging for the same equipment twice. If you're not already with us, you can get to where we're starting from on the LMN home screen. You're going to go budgeting and estimating, then choose the button for estimating catalog, and this time you want to click on the equipment section. Now here in this section, we're going to walk you through the process of calculating the costs and the price you need to charge for your various pieces of billable equipment. You might be staring at the screen wondering, I already put this in my equipment budget. Why isn't it coming over? Well, your equipment budget has every individual piece of equipment in it. Look at your trucks. It's got your '09 Chevy half-ton as an example, your '08 Ford F-250, and maybe the Dodge you use for your maintenance crew. Now, even though they might have slightly different costs, these are all half-ton trucks or three-quarter-ton trucks. They're all very close in cost per hour. When you're estimating a project, it's highly unlikely that you're going to know exactly which truck is going to do this job. This level of detail is simply not necessary. You need all your trucks broken down for your company costs, but when you're estimating, you really only need to think about types of trucks, not every individual truck. So keep your equipment catalog general and simple. That'll make estimating fast and easy. Using the example above, really all we need in our estimating catalog is one crew truck. We don't need each make and model and year. That's important for your budget, but that's way too much detail for an estimator. Now, you may need to set up a few different styles of crew trucks in your catalog because their costs differ. A half-ton pickup certainly costs less than a 5-ton dump, so you'd want one of a half-ton and one of a 5-ton dump, if you own both, in your estimating catalog. But stay away from identifying equipment within the same type with different makes and models. To add a vehicle or equipment now to your catalog, you simply need to click the Add New button on this screen. A new equipment screen will appear. You're going to start by entering the name of the equipment. So if you're entering a crew truck, call it crew truck. If you're entering a specific type of crew truck, call it crew truck -half-ton or crew truck -5-ton dump. This way, all your crew trucks are going to be grouped together alphabetically because they all start with C for crew. Same goes for any of your equipment. I wouldn't name things by my model number first, because that's going to make equipment hard to find, especially for new estimators who may come aboard your company in the future. It's much easier to name things like this: excavator -301.8 and excavator -305. Again, all your excavators are going to show up grouped under E's. All your skid steers show up grouped under S, under the word skid steer. This is going to make estimating far easier and faster going forward. Now what you want to do is choose the equipment type. You've got two choices here. It can be a vehicle or it can be a piece of equipment. If you need to, you can enter a description for the equipment, but again, it's not necessary. Now you can choose whether you want to bill for it in hours or days. For service type work, like maintenance or snow or irrigation, it's likely that you'll want to bill in hours because you're rarely at the customer's site for a complete day. On the flip side, with construction type work, you're almost always at one site all day. So billing in days actually makes estimating faster and easier. Now it's time to enter the cost per hour. If you know the operating cost per hour, or you want to use an industry standard, you're free to just type that cost in this box. If you don't have any idea what your cost per hour is, then relax and click that little calculator button right beside the box. We'll walk you through it. The calculator button launches the equipment cost calculator screen. So let's start at the top of this screen and work our way down. First, choose whether the equipment is owned or financed. This is going to change the types of questions that you need to answer. For this example, I'm going to walk through an owned equipment. Now you want to forecast the number of billable hours your equipment or vehicle is going to work this year. Now, rather than trying to think of actually how many hours it's specifically moving or being operated, the easiest way to do this is multiply the number of days per year that you guess it works by the number of hours in an average day. You can calculate the cost by operating hour, especially for equipment, but then you need to estimate thinking about exactly the number of hours the equipment will be operating. It's much easier just to think about the cost of equipment in terms of days. If you're totally lost as to the number of hours that this equipment works, what you could do is look at a typical driver or equipment operator's payroll record. For instance, let's say you're calculating the billable hours for your maintenance truck, but you don't have any idea how many hours it worked. Well, what you could do is use your foreman's payroll records. If you paid her or him 1,600 hours last year, then chances are that your truck worked about the same. Now what you do is enter the number of hours in a typical workday, and this will be used to calculate a daily cost or price. Next, you want to enter the purchase price, or the price that you'd have to pay to replace the equipment when you go to buy a new one. If entering crew trucks and you have several different types or costs, or any kind of equipment really, you can use an average to keep things nice, neat, and simple. Next, you want to enter a market finance rate. Now, you don't need to enter anything here, but if you want to keep up with the cost of inflation, we recommend that you add around 2% in this box here. Now you want to enter the expected life of the vehicle in years. Now, this doesn't mean how many years you have left in its life. You need to enter the total of its expected life. Let's look at an example. Say you keep trucks for 7 years. 7 is your expected life, no matter how many years you've used up. Even if you've only got 1 year left on the truck, you enter 7, because you don't want to try to recover all the costs of the truck in the 1 year you have left. That's not going to work. Now what you want to do is add the resale value at the end of its life. This will be what you sell the equipment for when you're done using it. If it's going to be worthless, then just leave this number at 0. When you're done that section, you can move to the operating costs. Start with the average maintenance, repair, and insurance and licensing costs per year. These are annual totals. Now again, these are going to vary depending on the age of your equipment, how long you keep it, and how carefully your staff treats it. But remember, these costs need to include regular replacement costs like brakes, tires, scratch and dent fixes, and occasionally bigger items like transmissions. Now typically you're looking at between $1,500 and $2,500 per year in maintenance costs for trucks. Equipment is going to vary a lot depending on the type of equipment, the size of the equipment, and how much you use it. All these numbers are per vehicle or per equipment. So when you're entering your licensing and insurance costs, you're just going to enter the cost per one vehicle or per one equipment, not your total cost. Finally, you want to enter the fuel cost burned by this vehicle or equipment. So start by entering the average price of fuel in gallons or in liters, whatever you pay for your area. Finally, you need to calculate your fuel costs. Start by entering the average price of fuel in gallons or liters for your area. This is what you pay on average for a gallon or for a liter of fuel. Next, enter how many gallons or liters this equipment uses per day. It's unlikely that you actually track this for each specific vehicle, and that's okay. Most contractors don't. So just try to estimate how much fuel you use per week in gallons or liters, and then divide that number by the number of working days in a week. For example, if your trucks use 1 full tank per week, and we have a 100 liter or 25 gallon tank, then divide that amount by 5 days to figure out how much fuel you use each day. Obviously, you're going to adjust those numbers to suit your company's average fuel consumption. And when you're done, the calculator's gone ahead and crunched the numbers and calculated for you a cost per hour and a per day cost for this piece of equipment. Now, this cost includes everything that you've entered on this screen, from purchasing costs to operating costs to fuel costs. Everything is wrapped up in this nice, easy number. Now click OK, and this cost will get transferred back from the calculator to the vehicle or equipment that you're entering in the catalog. So we're back on the equipment screen, and your budget is going to take over from here. If your pricing option is set to budget default, the system is going to read the overhead and recovery numbers from your budget and then calculate a price for you. Don't forget, you're going to be able to adjust this price by setting a fixed price or by setting a custom profit margin using the pricing option buttons already on the screen. When you're done, click OK to add this equipment to your catalog, and you're ready to move on to the next one. Now, to make estimating a heck of a lot simpler, think about grouping equipment together in groups. Let's look at a maintenance truck for an example. Your maintenance trucks pull out of the yard, and each one has a truck, a trailer, a few mowers, trimmers, blowers, and it's all on board and basically goes around to every job like that. Now, you don't want to have to include each one of these pieces of equipment one by one in every estimate for this crew. So here's a way to make it easy on yourself. Check the download section of this video, and you'll find a spreadsheet called Equipment Group Cost Calculator. And you may have used this cost calculator when we built our equipment budget. Here's where you can enter average costs and lifespan of that smaller equipment into one spreadsheet. When you're complete, it'll spit out an hourly cost for the entire group. Let's say you entered a crew truck in your estimating catalog. The operating cost per hour is shown here on the screen. But remember, that only includes the cost for this truck. It would be easier, especially for the estimator, if the cost for the truck, the trailer, and all the standard tools and equipment that come stocked on the trailer were all included in one complete package. Well, you can do this, and you can do it easily with that spreadsheet included in the download section. Open up your group cost calculator spreadsheet, and then work out the cost for a trailer and all the major equipment on board. Looking at my sample here, I get a total for this group of equipment as an hourly operating cost. All I need to do now is take this number and go back and add it on top of the truck hourly cost that I calculated with my equipment cost calculator. And what I'll end up with is one simple combined rate that includes the cost of the truck, the trailer, and all the standard equipment that I included on the spreadsheet. So here, with only a few seconds of extra work, I've actually created an equipment item that's going to save me and my estimators tons of time and, better yet, lost costs when they're estimating the work done by this truck and trailer package. Now you can go through your equipment catalog and you can enter all your standard billable equipment. Remember, as you're entering, you don't need to include any equipment that you've already included in your overhead budget back when you were budgeting. Those equipment costs are recovered in your overhead markup factors. You also might come across a piece of equipment that you just know you're never going to include when you actually build estimates. If that's the case, you're best to recheck your budget. It may be better off to go back in and take the cost of that equipment and build it into your overhead budget. Let's use something really simple, like a tamper. Maybe you don't think about the cost of a tamper when you're estimating your jobs. Better make sure that the costs of replacing a tamper every couple of years are built into your overhead budget and not your equipment budget. Remember again, equipment budget costs are direct costs that are going to get recovered directly on your estimates. Overhead costs are anything that don't get recovered directly on your estimates. So if you have a piece of equipment that you're never going to build into an estimate, make sure that equipment is in your overhead budget. That's the only way that you're going to recover those costs accurately. So very good. In the next video, we're going to help you cost and price out your materials. It's a simple process. So if you have a few minutes, then make sure you join us now.